In a corporate laboratory in 1965, a brilliant chemist made an accidental discovery that would save millions of lives, revolutionize industrial manufacturing, and generate billions of dollars in profits. She created a liquid crystalline solution that could be spun into fibers 5 times stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum, and virtually indestructible under extreme conditions. Her revolutionary material would stop bullets, protect firefighters, reinforce aircraft, and become essential to countless modern technologies. Yet when the DuPont Corporation announced the miracle fiber to the world, her name appeared nowhere in the press releases. The patents listed male colleagues as inventors, and the company executives who took credit for her work collected prestigious awards while she remained anonymous in her laboratory. This is the extraordinary story of Stephanie Kwolek, the chemist who invented Kevlar but watched a multinational corporation steal her recognition and build an empire on her stolen genius. Born in 1923 in New Kensington, Pennsylvania, Stephanie Louise Kwolek grew up in a working-class Polish immigrant family during the Great Depression. Her father died when she was 10 years old, leaving her mother to raise 2 children alone on a meager income from teaching. Stephanie excelled in school, particularly in science and mathematics, subjects that most educators believed were unsuitable for young women. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, but her family's financial situation made medical school impossible, so she chose chemistry as a more affordable path to a scientific career. In 1946, at age 23, she graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with a degree in chemistry and immediately faced the harsh reality of gender discrimination in post-war America. Chemical companies were hiring thousands of male veterans returning from World War II, but female scientists were told that laboratory work was too dangerous and intellectually demanding for women. She applied to DuPont, one of America's largest chemical manufacturers, expecting rejection like all the others. Instead, a progressive hiring manager named William Hale Church recognized her exceptional academic record and offered her a position in the textile fibers department. Stephanie accepted, viewing it as temporary employment while she saved money for medical school, but she would spend the next 40 years at DuPont making discoveries that changed the world. She was assigned to work on polymer research, studying how long-chain molecules could be manipulated to create synthetic fibers with specific properties. In the 1950s and 60s, DuPont was desperately searching for materials that could replace steel in automobile tires, reducing weight and improving fuel efficiency. Stephanie worked in a male-dominated research laboratory where her female colleagues were secretaries and her male peers often dismissed her ideas or took credit for her experimental work. She responded by becoming meticulously careful with her laboratory notebooks, documenting every observation and insight to protect her intellectual contributions. If you want to discover more brilliant scientists whose groundbreaking discoveries were stolen by the companies and colleagues they trusted, subscribe now and activate the notification bell. Every week, we expose the untold stories of researchers and inventors whose work was plagiarized, whose names were erased from patents, and whose genius enriched others while they received nothing. In 1964, Stephanie was working with aramid polymers, trying to create strong, lightweight fibers by dissolving these complex molecules in solvents and spinning them into threads. The standard approach produced polymer solutions that were thick, cloudy, and difficult to work with. One day, her experimental process created something completely unexpected, a thin liquid solution that was cloudy and opalescent, with properties unlike anything she had seen before. The liquid crystalline solution looked wrong according to all conventional polymer chemistry, and most chemists would have discarded it as a failed experiment. Stephanie trusted her scientific instincts and asked the technician who operated the spinning machine to process her unusual solution. He refused, insisting that the thin cloudy liquid would clog his expensive equipment and ruin the delicate machinery. She persisted, eventually convincing him to try spinning the mysterious solution, and what emerged was absolutely extraordinary. The synthetic fiber was incredibly strong, far exceeding anything the DuPont laboratory had produced before. When tested, the material was 5 times stronger than steel by weight, extremely heat-resistant, and remarkably lightweight. Stephanie had accidentally discovered a way to align polymer molecules in near-perfect parallel crystalline structures, creating unprecedented mechanical strength. The breakthrough was revolutionary, with immediate applications in military equipment, industrial manufacturing, and consumer products. She spent the next year refining the chemical process, documenting every variable, and developing the manufacturing techniques that would turn her laboratory discovery into a commercially viable product. DuPont recognized they had something extraordinary and immediately began patent applications and preparations for commercial production. But in the corporate paperwork and public announcements, Stephanie's name began disappearing. The original patents listed her as the lead inventor, but subsequent improvement patents added male colleagues who had done minimal work on the actual discovery. Company press releases announcing the new miracle fiber emphasized DuPont's research capabilities while barely mentioning the individual scientist who made the breakthrough. In 1971, DuPont launched Kevlar commercially, marketing it as a revolutionary super fiber developed by their elite research team. The advertising campaigns showed male scientists in laboratory coats. The corporate executives who gave interviews to business magazines were all men, and the technical presentations at scientific conferences were delivered by Stephanie's male supervisors who claimed partial credit for her work. She remained in her laboratory, continuing to improve Kevlar and develop related materials, watching as others built careers and reputations on the foundation of her discovery. Kevlar became one of the most successful industrial materials in history. Police departments began using Kevlar body armor that saved thousands of law enforcement lives. Military forces worldwide adopted Kevlar helmets and protective gear that dramatically improved soldier survival rates. Firefighters wore Kevlar suits that allowed them to enter burning buildings previously too dangerous to approach. The aerospace industry used Kevlar to reinforce aircraft structures, reducing weight while increasing strength. Automobile manufacturers incorporated Kevlar into tires, brake pads, and structural components. The material appeared in sports equipment, telecommunications cables, construction materials, and thousands of other applications. DuPont earned billions of dollars from Kevlar sales, becoming one of the most profitable products in the company's history. Corporate executives received massive bonuses for the success of the Kevlar division. Research directors who supervised Stephanie's department were promoted and celebrated as innovative leaders. Meanwhile, Stephanie Kwolek continued working as a research chemist with a modest salary, receiving no financial benefits from the commercial success of her invention beyond her regular paycheck. The patent system itself was structured to favor corporations over individual inventors. When researchers worked for companies like DuPont, their employment contracts typically specified that all discoveries belonged to the employer regardless of who made them. Stephanie had signed such an agreement when hired in 1946, never imagining she would create something worth billions. DuPont owned the Kevlar patents outright, and while Stephanie was listed as the inventor on the original filing, the company controlled all commercial rights and collected all profits. For decades, Stephanie remained virtually unknown outside the specialized chemistry community. Textbooks discussing Kevlar mentioned DuPont as the developer but rarely named the actual inventor. Business histories of successful corporate innovations credited DuPont's research culture rather than individual scientists. Stephanie continued working quietly, developing 4 more revolutionary polymer families and earning 28 patents during her career, each one contributing to DuPont's profit while her name remained obscure. She retired from DuPont in 1986 after 40 years of service, having transformed polymer chemistry and created materials that saved countless lives. Her retirement party was a small internal affair with colleagues and supervisors, nothing like the lavish celebrations when corporate executives departed. She settled into a quiet retirement, proud of her scientific achievements but frustrated by the lack of public recognition for work that had such enormous impact. Then, slowly, the recognition began arriving, decades too late but finally acknowledging her genius. In 1995, she was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, becoming only the 4th woman ever honored. In 1996, she received the National Medal of Technology from President Clinton, standing in the White House finally receiving the official recognition she deserved. Professional chemistry organizations began giving her Lifetime Achievement Awards and inviting her to speak about her career and discoveries. But even as Stephanie received these belated honors, DuPont continued marketing Kevlar without prominently acknowledging her as the inventor. Corporate advertising emphasized the DuPont brand rather than the individual scientist who created the product. New generations of police officers wearing Kevlar vests and soldiers protected by Kevlar helmets had no idea a woman chemist had invented the material saving their lives. The financial rewards for Kevlar continued flowing to corporate shareholders and executives, while Stephanie lived on her modest research pension. Stephanie Kwolek died on June 18, 2014, at age 90, her brilliant mind finally at rest after decades of watching others claim credit for her work. The obituaries finally told her story properly, explaining how a working-class girl from Pennsylvania had created one of the most important industrial materials in modern history. Scientists and engineers who had built careers working with Kevlar published tributes acknowledging the debt they owed to her foundational discovery. Yet even today, 10 years after her death, most people who benefit from Kevlar every day have never heard her name. Ask someone who invented the bulletproof vest and they will likely say DuPont or mention some male scientist whose contribution was minimal compared to Stephanie's revolutionary breakthrough. Corporate history has a way of erasing individual genius in favor of institutional narratives that serve business interests. The story of Stephanie Kwolek reveals the fundamental injustice of how scientific discovery is credited and rewarded in corporate research environments. She created a material that saved millions of lives, generated billions in profits, and revolutionized countless industries. Her intellectual contribution was absolutely irreplaceable, the breakthrough moment that made everything else possible. Yet the financial rewards, the public recognition, and the historical credit went primarily to the corporation that happened to employ her when she made the discovery. DuPont executives who contributed nothing to the scientific work became wealthy from Kevlar sales. Male colleagues who did supporting research on Stephanie's discovery built careers as Kevlar experts. The corporate brand became synonymous with the innovation while the actual inventor remained anonymous. This pattern repeats throughout scientific history, particularly for women and minority researchers who made groundbreaking discoveries in corporate laboratories. Their employment contracts gave companies legal ownership of intellectual property. Their gender or race made it easier for corporate publicists to erase them from the narrative. Their lack of media connections and political power meant their stories went untold until decades later, if ever. Stephanie Kwolek deserved to become a household name, as famous as Thomas Edison or Marie Curie. Instead, she spent most of her life as an anonymous corporate employee while others grew rich and famous from her genius. The belated recognition she received in her final years was meaningful but insufficient, a token acknowledgement that could never compensate for decades of erasure. Every police officer protected by a Kevlar vest, every soldier wearing a Kevlar helmet, every firefighter entering a burning building in Kevlar gear, every civilian who benefited from the thousands of applications of this revolutionary material owes their safety to Stephanie Kwolek. Her brilliant discovery changed the world and saved countless lives. The least we can do is remember her name and tell her story, ensuring that future generations know the truth about who created Kevlar and who reaped the rewards of her stolen genius.